All right. Hi, everyone. This is the Disability Ministry Video Roundtable for the month of June from Key Ministry. I'm Beth Golick, and I'm joined by my colleague, Catherine Boyle, who's our Director of Mental Health Ministry. And we have Victoria White on here today as well. She's going to be a huge leader in this conversation. So what we are talking about this month is universal design in worship. So this is a conversation I'd like us to all pitch in with experience, with questions. And I think I'm really looking forward to this conversation. So Tori, if I can just call on you to get us started. I know you've been in conversations about this all day, I think already. So why don't you kick us off?
Well, thanks, Beth. Goodness. I'm not that big of a hero, everybody. Don't let her fool you. No, I've just been at the last day and a half with the CICW, that's the Calvin Institute of Christian Worship. And we've been talking with people from all over the globe about universal and responsive design for worship. So thinking about people of all abilities participating in our worship services, and then also about cultural awareness. So it's been a very deep, rich learning time. So I'm coming to you actually from Calvin University here. I haven't even left yet. So I am excited to think with you all about universal design in your worshiping contexts and in your ministries, and what it means to prepare a place and expect that people of all abilities will be showing up. So that's just a little context of where we're coming from.
So let's start out maybe with a definition. So when you say universal design in worship, what does that mean to you, Tori? And then if anybody else wants to jump in.
Yeah, I'll try to keep my answer brief, but hopefully clear, and then feel free to ask questions as well. So universal design came out of architecture. Architects design a building, right, with if it's multiple stories and floors, then they put an elevator in it, expecting that people will need multiple ways to get up to those levels and floors. So they don't just go around the neighborhood asking, hey, do you use a walker or a wheelchair? You think maybe you're going to use this building, because if that's true, then I guess we'll put an elevator in for you. But if not, then we won't do that, right? They just build it from the start. And interestingly enough, the elevator shaft is usually the first thing constructed when a new building is going up. So it's a good sign that there's universal design going on in there, but also push button doors. There are all kinds of things that are actually universal design in practice. In fact, I had a fun back to learning moment when I learned that garage door openers are something that are now actually universal design. They were originally designed for people with disabilities, but now we all take advantage of them if you are fortunate enough to have a garage. So lucky you if you have one. I don't. So universal design sprang out of architecture and just making our spaces accessible to people with varied abilities. And then education really grabbed a hold of this idea a couple of decades ago. And now there's universal design for learning, and CAST.org, that's CAST.org, is a great place to learn more about universal design for learning. There are learning modules on the Iris Center website that Dr. Carter actually helps to develop. So they model universal design for learning in the way that they present all of their teaching and professional development resources on the Iris Center. But there is one actually on universal design as well. That's a really excellent tool for learning about some of the core components of universal design for learning, and not just the idea of providing options for engagement, but some of the reasons that you would do a variety of things and think about how different learners will engage in learning. So we now borrow all of that phraseology in our worship settings and say, what do we mean by universal design for worship and universal design in our ministry context? Learning from architecture, which obviously applies, and learning from education, which also obviously applies. But we also have unique things about worship settings that we think about that sort of create even more ideas and ways to engage in this topic.
All right, thank you. That's a lot of information. So Victoria shared a couple of resources, and we'll make sure to include those links when we post this recording on our Vimeo and YouTube channels and on our website. So we'll make sure to get those out. Good, she's sharing them now, yay. Oh, good, because I wrote them down wrong. I didn't hear him correctly. Okay, that's great. And yeah, the background. So Victoria's got background noise. I was looking around to see which one of you I was going to mute, but it turns out it was her. So that's why there was some background noise. All right, would anybody like to ask a question or share maybe an example of something that your church is doing or you wish was doing regarding universal design in worship? I'll give you a chance to unmute. So, well, I'll throw out something. So let me ask you this. Let me ask the group this. How much of it is actual like structural things, and how much of it is like an attitude or a like communication? Does that question even make sense?
This is Alan. Can you hear me?
Yes, Alan, please.
Yes, I'm visually impaired. And one of the things I requested was that since I can use an iPhone with either earbuds or Bluetooth to my hearing aids, I've requested that the lyrics for the songs, which are projected and have been for maybe some 8 years now, would be made available to me before the service so that with gestures, I can use my iPhone and participate in the song service of the during singing.
Okay.
And so that was a process that I went through in order to encourage that those lyrics be made available. And so congregational technical staff sometimes need to be aware that that is an easy task, because with CCLI, which provides lyrics in .txt form, a very universal or ubiquitous format, it can be made available. And so that took some time. So there is some attitude changes that needed to be addressed. And so I do get those, but that took a period of 5 years to accomplish.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a great point, that providing lyrics or other information ahead of time, right? You had to request it, which would make it seem like a sort of personalized need just for you. But that really helps out a lot of people. And Amy Troyer actually and I worked on putting together something like a Spotify list, or, you know, and providing ahead of time, these are the songs we're going to sing. If you'd like to listen to them ahead of time, get to know them, that's great preparatory work that actually helps out a lot of people for a variety of reasons. So there's a great example of universal design. Absolutely.
And that would also pertain to sermon notes. Again, those became a lot easier, and depending on the pastor, those would be more or less in detail, and that helps to understand the flow. Obviously, if there are pictures and stuff that are not described, that's a different question, but at least the content outline and so on, one can follow along in the sermon as those are displayed as well.
That's great. Thank you, Alan, for sharing that perspective. Yeah, and that's such good information. And what I'm hearing is a couple different things. So there was an accommodation there, but that can help more than just you. And having things like song lyrics and sermon notes in ways that are accessible can really help everyone. Yeah, thank you. That's great. Who else would like to share?
I think the answer is both. So like when I think about universal design, from my point of view, I think about a worship service that's not overwhelmingly sensory filled. So the volume is not rock concert level. There's not lights flashing in your face, those things, because universally anyone can go into a worship service that is not overwhelming, but only some people can handle being overwhelmed. And that is an attitude problem. with some churches that feel like it's more about the performance than the people. I can't even pretend to be nice about it. But at the same time, I have talked to, like in our work, we talk to a lot of people with different circumstances. And when I've learned from families who have kids that have power wheelchairs and things like that, it's also structural. So I've heard like they have places where their family are supposed to sit, where they can access, but then if they want to sit up front, they're not supposed to. And it's very difficult to get the power wheelchairs through. So I think it's both.
Yeah. And I guess part of where I was going with my question, like when I think of worship services in particular that are welcoming to all, okay, so where, so be it sensory friendly, there are no barriers. I think part of that is setting the expectation that we all are designed to worship, but we might do that a little differently. And so, and I don't know if this falls under universal design, so I guess that's what I'm asking. But in my mind, that's setting the expectation that there may be folks who worship by vocalizing or twirling or what have you. And it may not look the same for everybody. And that is okay because we are all worshiping our Creator. So is that universal design, or is that just?
I think that's universal
Welcoming.
attitude. It's a heart. So this is a subject, and then I'll stop. But it's the one thing that I get fired up about. Maybe not the one thing, but
I love to see Barb fired up though, so this is fun. Go ahead.
it is one thing I get really fired up about and actually makes me angry. Like I can't even pretend. It makes me mad. But it's an attitude, and that the way people think something should look or sound is more important than the people. And that is, I don't know if that's universal design or not, but that is a heart problem in a church. And so for me, the way I always think about it, because I have sensory processing disorder, and we have a lot of people with autism in my family, and we can't go into those services that are really loud and have flashing lights. I have friends with epilepsy, they can't go in. So it's not even a matter of, is this uncomfortable? It's a matter of no. And I think like, would I have a party, and let's say I invite the whole class, my kids' class over, and only serve peanut butter sandwiches, knowing that some of the kids cannot eat them? No. But in church, we have this idea that it's about the Instagram pictures, and that is, we can only reach young people if we make it into a giant rock concert. I don't get it. You reach people by connecting them to other people. That is how you reach people. Anyway, I have recently, and I will not go into, but I have recently had my eyes open for the first time personally with a church whose attitude was basically, it's not our problem, and this is the way we want to do it, and you can sit outside. And it made me feel for the first time in a long time why people outside the church dislike Christians. And so I feel like for me, I don't know if this is universal design, but this is something we need to really look at as a heart level, as a people. What is the most important? Is it the people, or is it the packaging? And then I will
That
stop.
is so well said. And I personally love it when Barb Stanley gets up on her soapbox. So Victoria's sharing some things in the chat, and I'm going to read them because I think this actually kind of speaks to this. So the first thing you posted, Tori, was from when Alan was sharing about the sermon notes and the lyrics. And it says, a universal design tip, providing song lyrics, sermon notes, other information ahead of time in multiple formats and or available for use on personal devices. I think that also, helps folks with anxiety, who experience anxiety, like knowing what comes next, I think can be super helpful. The other thing you shared, universal design in practice of attitude, willingness to change structures and systems to benefit one, but actually benefits many, most, or all. And I think that's very much what we were talking about. So I'm going to say that yes, attitude can be part of universal design. Okay. And then she offered a couple of scripture references, Romans 12:10, Philippians 2:3. Thank you for sharing that. Good stuff. And we were getting, Barb, you were getting some claps. I saw Patricia was doing some claps for you when you were talking. So, all right, who else would like to share?
I'd like to add, this is Alan again. I'd like to add another thing, that in the process of designing worship services, or even content that is distributed to the public, it would be helpful if a person with a disability or someone aware of disabilities is part of the planning process. I think that's important, that it's not a reactive type of environment, but it's proactive. And that, again, that's an attitudinal perspective, that they reach out to some and say, we would like to have you as part of our planning to see how we can do this proactively.
I love it.
Yeah.
So yeah, so basically people don't know what they don't know. And so by bringing people who do know to the table, I love that. It's not reactive, it's proactive. I think that is really, really important. And I think I cut somebody off. Was somebody about to say something?
I'll jump in. I'm kind of piggybacking on Barb. We have homes for people who are in wheelchairs, and typically the seating for people is in the back. There's not an option for seating in the front. And when you stand to praise God, people are looking at other people's backsides. Mm-hmm. They can't see the words to the song. They can't see the worship team. They can't see anything except one person. And I think, as far as you were talking about movement in worship, I think we have an idea that there is one way to worship, and that's the only way to do it. And I think that's a large part of the problem.
Yeah, that's good. Good stuff.
So I just put in the chat here too, that a core component of universal design is proactively providing options. So kind of tagging on what Alan has said and what you've said, Patricia, is that it's, like you said, you're not reacting to things, you're proactively asking what might be some needs we could consider from the start. So you're asking for contributions from those who will be impacted by the decisions that you make and the planning that you do. And it's having just some stuff that's going to help everyone. But like you also pointed out, Patricia, it's about providing options. And like you even said, Barb, where can people sit? Can they only sit in one area if they're using a wheelchair? Or do we have flexible seating that allows us to move around chairs so that people can sit wherever they would like to, and we can move the chairs out of the way from in front of them or on the side or what have you. So it's that goes back to that willingness to change our structures and our spaces even. But I've even been a part of conversations where as simple as having a wiggle cushion at church was a point of contention. And a friend of mine said, I get judged for bringing in our church bag with my 4 kids a wiggle cushion, and we just pass it down the pew to whichever kid needs it most at that moment because they're the most wiggly. And sometimes mom has to enforce, okay, your brother needs it worse, so he gets it right now. And she said, but I'm just so tired of getting these dirty looks from everyone else in the church. And I thought, why isn't the church providing 4 wiggle cushions? Because they expect kids to have wiggles when they're sitting in these wooden pews, if that's, what the church is still going to go with. So like you said, it's this idea of proactively thinking for those who are going to be there, having a variety of needs to be able to be in that space and participate in a variety of ways. So one of the conversations I just had here with some people who write worship music was about the Psalms and different ways that we engage in Psalm songs in our worship settings. And we just contemplated Psalm 150 and how it doesn't even talk about singing. as one of the ways of praising the Lord, but it's the psalm that repeats praise the Lord, right? All these ways to praise the Lord. And so all the ways that we could praise could be visual with streamers or with dance or with artwork. I was talking with someone whose entire grant project was about pottery as worship and all the ways their community came together, and people with autism were engaging with the church because they had now a physical, tangible thing to do that was constituting worship in community. So yeah, there are just so many different options. So Barb Newman used to call it, let's offer Chex Mix instead of expecting everybody to be happy with Pringles.
I love
You
it.
know, that sort of uniformity versus a variety of shapes, sizes, and flavors.
That's great. Thank you. As I look around now, I don't know all of the churches that are represented here, but I know a few of them, and some of them are pretty new and some have been around for a while. Can anybody share, would anybody like to share an example of like a intentional decision that your church has made regarding universal design in worship? Like an actual like conversation or thought or decision, either in your children's ministry setting or in big church, as we like to say, in children's ministry. I'll give one. So I'm part of the children's ministry team at my church, and we have taken a few of the things that we've used in our special needs ministry and applied them to all of children's ministry. We just found that it benefited all kids. What worked for one kid, works really well for all kids. So having a visual schedule of the morning where we actually, as each thing happens, it's projected on the screen up front during large group, and all the kids say check with their arms real big. We use worship scarves, which is something, we had bought a couple of them for our sensory friendly, like our special needs classroom. I'm air quoting special needs classroom. And we found that it really helps engage all of the elementary students. So those are just a couple of things that we have done in our children's ministry setting. Anybody else like to share anything?
I will say I haven't been a part. I'm visiting churches in Dallas as I just moved. And so it's been very fun to visit and see how different churches worship and the thoughtful ways that they are engaging the whole congregation. And one piece that I've been really paying attention to is communion. And some churches are doing it every week, some are not. And so it's just been very fascinating to watch them do it. But how the one church that I've gone to a few times, that you receive, now that, COVID has happened and you have the cups with the bread and the juice and all, but everyone's receiving it as they come in. And then if you do not get it for some reason, when you come in, it's brought to you, but it just helps with accessibility, people not having to navigate and wind their way up, anxiety of getting up and doing something in front of other people. And then some cups have been easier to open than others. But it's just been in summer gluten, all gluten-free. So it's just been very fascinating to kind of watch the intentional decisions of churches surrounding communion. And then the one that brings it to you or you get it when you walk in kind of has the heart behind why we do communion and kind of what to expect during this time. And then they also share about it from up front. So you can read about it, you can also hear it. So everyone kind of understands what that time looks like. So I thought it's been very fun and impressive. I have no idea how they got to that place or why they've decided to make it that way, but it's been the most accessible and designed for everybody that I have seen thus far, which was encouraging. So
that's good.
I'm looking forward to more conversations with their church. But anyway, that was just a piece of the worship service that I've been really watching a lot recently.
Yeah, that's a whole segment that we could talk about. So our church made the decision to do gluten-free communion because of a few individuals. There were a couple of volunteers in my ministry that I knew did not go to church on the days that we did communion because they felt too weird sitting there and they could not partake. So anyway, that we made the decision, instead of just having it available for a few, that we would just do it for all. And then it takes away that barrier. Tori, I'm going to share what you just typed in. So universal design in action in our churches, noted from the conversation. Children's church using tools from special needs ministry, such as visual schedules, which were projected, worship scarves. Communion being offered right when you enter the building, removing barriers to receiving it. Gluten-free, easy to open packaging, along with information about why and what communion is in that church. So I love this. We have like live notes going on. So we will definitely put all these in the on the Vimeo recording. Excellent. Who else would like to share?
I had a conversation with the church recently that I really appreciated their perspective. They're in the process of starting kind of being more intentional about some of the needs that they're seeing in their church. And one of the things I noticed specifically in children's ministry as they're growing significantly is like when families come into like the check-in process, and just the chaos and craziness that is because of so many families and so many kids and going all different directions, and thinking about how do we restructure how families come in, and can there even be a way for families that maybe are having a hard time that morning, or that walking into that like main lobby environment for their children's ministry is just too much. And I appreciated the way that they were willing to think through, what does that look like to be able to bring families into the church, even literally like into the physical building, and help, it's because for them, it was like, there's really not a way to like avoid this mass chaos when, 100 families are coming together in a short period of time to drop off, over 100 kids. But could there be a way, since all of the rooms have outdoor exterior entrances, that the certain kids could go directly to the room and there could be a check-in process in the room itself? So I think like even just when we think about that in the big scheme of things for like church in general, right, that is there a way that like there's an entrance into church that you don't have? I know I go to a small church personally, and we're too large of a church for our space that we're in right now, and I can't stand walking through our lobby because it's like not that big of a space, and everyone is in there talking and gathered together. And then there's like food tables there because our church is really big on sharing food together and fellowship and through food. But like literally I walk into that space and walk out as fast as I can to get through, because you have no other access into the sanctuary. You have to walk through that lobby. Versus if there is another door, and if the church would open it and if I knew I was invited and welcome to walk in that way and not through the lobby, like how much more comfortable would that make it? So again, thinking through like that doesn't just necessarily impact our kids maybe with autism, but just other people that walking into a really overwhelming environment, like there's ways around that. So I appreciated that church's intention and like we recognize this as an issue, and how can we kind of work around that to make it still a good experience for families in the mornings.
Yeah, that's great. So yeah, so a problem or an issue for maybe a handful of people, actually the solution might benefit a lot more than just those few. Tori, you were gonna say something. Oh, you want to read that?
It made me think of a couple of things, but yeah, I was just jotting down that universal design in action for the check-in process in children's ministry, and that traffic flow as families enter is utilizing other entrances for check-in. But it's important to notice what you said, that you need the invitation to use other entrances. You don't want to sort of sneak around the back. So I think that's an important part for us as ministry leaders to think about, is the invitation and the hospitality that is all kind of wrapped into this topic, that it is a piece of hospitality to offer the different options that we need to, including in that check-in process. I've been to many churches where I was trying to bring my own kids, and even just that check-in process, does that have options? Do I have to verbally tell you all the things that my kids need as their personal, differences cause you to need to know about them if you're going to have them in your presence for 2 hours without me? Can I submit that online ahead of time? Can we meet about that over coffee? Can I write it down for you? Or does that have to get blabbed in the hallway where 150 people are crammed into this small space, right? So even right there, what works best for the family are great questions. And are we asking the right questions? Is the information that we're gathering actually helpful for this proactive planning of universal design? So are we asking, basic name, phone number, family members, et cetera, demographic information, but are we asking, what does this kid love to do? And what areas might this kid need some support to be in this place? And are we asking those kinds of questions of all of us as we participate in the church? What gifts do I bring to the congregation, and what needs for support do I have? And are we making it normal to have both of those things when I come to the community? So that, again, we're just expecting the need for support to be present. So then we as church leaders know that we're going to invest in things like push button doors and devices ready to read you the song lyrics that are being displayed, or having it in braille or large print, or having multiple entrances available, right? Because we're listening. And we have an avenue already put in place to ask those questions right when somebody enters the space. Because again, we're just expecting that people come with a different set of gifts and needs for support.
Right. So one of the things you said, Tori, I just wanted to reiterate, and you talked about having like maybe electronic, like online forms for people to fill out. And that's something we talk about in Key Ministry often. And if you read Dr. Steve Gersovich's book on mental health in the church, having that option to, whatever it is, connect with a church, register, whatever, for events, whatever, having the option to do an electronic form instead of having to pick up the phone or, talk to a person can be huge for a family who experiences anxiety. So like, that's one of the things we always kind of recommend that churches consider. I also wanted to point out, like, what information do we need on students that will be in our care or in our classes on. So recently on Key Ministry, the podcast, we've done a couple episodes. One is on ISPs, or individualized spiritual plans, and one is on intake forms. And so those, you can go to keyministry.org/podcast and get some examples of like actual questions to ask. I'm going to read something in the chat that Patricia shared. Special needs ministry is especially a ministry of hospitality. Too often, hospitality focuses on recruiting those who do not attend, rather than caring for those who already do, which would in effect welcome those who do not. Yeah, good point. And then, oh yeah, okay, and Victoria already read the other thing that's in there.
So you pointed out the idea that even people with anxiety, just welcoming the option to engage through an online form, or even maybe to submit prayer requests in a private way like that. I know some churches, including my own, has a form, a kind of a welcome card or something, and you can write prayer requests on there, and you can note if you want it to be kept private or something like that. But as I also engage in conversations about hybrid services, online live streaming, how do we maintain community, some of those kinds of questions. What kind of options do we have for people to engage in those different platforms? Can you text in prayer requests? Can you email them in, right? Ways to respond either to and through the online service that we're offering, or simply offering those as multiple, again, options for how you engage when you are there in person as well. Wouldn't it be fun, like how we do Zoom meetings, and then we create a word cloud by like using an online poll or something to see what's everybody's response? What if we did that in our worship service instead? Text in the word that's been most meaningful to you from scripture this week, or whatever it would be, to again just provide options for engagement and prayer too. I think of some churches that did some really creative things. So you could text your prayer requests, you could email, you could stop by the church. They had drive-through prayer. So it was like a bank teller type situation, but the pastor was at the window and you could just drive up and he'd pray for you and off you go. And so I think, yeah, use what God provides your church to have a unique opportunity to just offer people options.
Well, and even, some churches, maybe at the end of service, there's a, come forward if you need prayer, and, we'll have pastors or elders or something in the front. Well, could there be additional options? I mean, in addition to like all the ones you just shared, but could maybe you stay in your seat and someone come to you? And whether that's an accessibility issue or I don't want to go stand in front of a whole bunch of people issue. So there's just so many options that we can consider. And a lot of them don't cost money. I'm just saying, these are things we can do. Anybody else? All right, so if there are no other questions or comments, here, okay, let me share from the chat. Victoria says, universal design offering options for prayer engagement. So text or email prayer requests, drive-through prayer, come to you at your seat prayer time, as well as the come forward prayer time. Thank you. These are excellent wrap-up notes. I love it.
I'm trying to model universal design here. But
I love it. I love it.
Plus I need it written in order for it to sink in my brain. If it's spoken, I'll kind of go.
Yeah, I need to see it, but as you can tell, I'm reading all the things, so I'm like experiencing it too. So I need that. Julie, your hand is raised.
I just wanted to say that, I am a person who cares about disability, obviously, or I wouldn't be here. And y'all that know me know that. But, there are things I don't think about. There are things that it just didn't even occur to me, some of the things that we're talking about right now. And I think what we need to do is have more conversation around this. And, maybe we don't even need to use the term universal design if that's offensive to some people, but instead just kind of open up that, well, what if we, I love what Barb said. I even quoted it down here. Now I can't find it, but just about, is it about the people or is it about the package? And can we extend that to all people? And then I'm sitting here and I'm under conviction because I'm thinking there are people in my church that don't know anything about any of this stuff. Am I letting them know? Am I trying to create a community atmosphere where we can be accessible? I'm trying to, but is there a better way for to get the word out, basically? Because you don't know, like you said, you don't know what you don't know. So I'm looking for ideas of how do we engage with people without hitting them over the head with all this, because sometimes that's what we really do want to do. But because it's like, sometimes it seems obvious and sometimes it's not obvious. Obviously, it's not obvious to me, some of these things that we talked about. So anyway, I just wanted to bring that to the surface that, because I'm sitting here under conviction, how can I'm sitting on great opportunity, I think, but how do you do that without being offensive to people, but at the same time being passionate and loving people through the process? But I'm just sitting here thinking, okay, we need to pull some pastors together and just have this conversation with them. Thank you, Victoria, for that. Seriously, I'm just, okay, I'm done. You got it.
Yeah, well, that's such a good point. And as Alan said, like the issue that he brought up, it took 5 years. And so I think it's like we need to start these conversations. So Catherine shared in the chat, Joanna French's blog post on Key Ministries' Church for Every Child blog was an excellent example of why people with disabilities need to be in church, because people without disabilities can't see the barriers and the impediments. This is one of the many valuable roles that people with disabilities play in churches. That's good. It's a great article. And we'll definitely link that one in. We've got a lot to link in to add to the notes for this this recording.
This is Alan again. Yeah. One of the things that has become apparent is that in our theological training and our Christian colleges that have programs in ministry, I think it'd be important that we have links into those programs so that a module or part of the training would be awareness. And sometimes there's a disconnect that a Christian college may have a special education program, and they also have a ministry curriculum, but the two are not together.
Right.
And to bridge those would, I think, be a help in bringing awareness that those that are being trained are exposed to this in their training. And it doesn't have to be necessarily a specific course or curriculum on disability ministry, but to incorporate that into what already exists.
Absolutely. That is such a good point. And I think, from what I know of some folks currently in the biz, I think we have some really good people who are, starting to be able to make these connections. So that's, fantastic point. I'm going to read from the comments because Tori took some more excellent notes. I love it. So those of us within the disability community even need conversations that keeps us thinking afresh, like, is it about the people or about the package? And also, are we letting our congregation and community know about these kinds of things as we learn them? Need friendly, easy entry ways to talk about universal design, maybe not using those words. And then Alan notes the theological training needs to include awareness of disabilities and universal design, bridging education and ministry training. Excellent, excellent notes, Tori. Ryan.
Yeah, I agree with Alan 100%. I like the way you put it, where now I'm forgetting exactly how you worded it, but it's something along the lines of it needs to be included in the things we're already doing. And that's kind of what I find is people just have this assumption that disability issues are different and unique and somehow specialized. And so they often kick disability ministry into the same category as a soup kitchen, where everybody would say it's great if your church has a soup kitchen, that's wonderful, but by no means does every church need to have a soup kitchen. And so if you wind up categorizing it in that kind of over specialization, then it makes it inaccessible to the general church. And so, yeah, I'm very much in favor of, whenever possible, using plain English words rather than technical terms, even though there's definitely a place and a reason why technical terms exist. It just doesn't do much to move the needle for your average pastor, to help them even understand what the heck you're talking about or what you're trying to accomplish. And so the more we just normalize it and make it an extension of the things that we already value and do, as opposed to a new and a novel and a unique activity, I think we make a lot of progress in actually implementing universal design without necessarily having to use those terms, and just in general.
Yeah, good stuff. So, wow, Tori, you're on it. Ryan notes we need normal and normalized language in order to make progress with pastors and in our churches. This is awesome. Well, let me ask you this. Would anybody like to share? I mean, I hope everybody took something away from this conversation. I mean, I know I did. Do you have any thoughts that you want to share about what your action step is, or what you might want to do with the information that we talked about today?
Yeah, I think
Go ahead, Barb, then Amy.
I think what Julie said is we need to not just keep this information to ourselves. We need to find ways that are inviting for other people to learn. And that means inviting for them to learn, not us lecturing them. Mm-hmm. So I think for me, I think initiating more conversations and talking to more people that are different than me and inviting people into that might be a good action step.
Love it. Amy.
Yeah, the visual schedule put up front was just like mind-boggling, because we have teachers that don't really use the first and then all that thing, but if they had it up front, like it would probably benefit every child in that room, and it would make that other child not feel so called out or odd looking, I guess would be a good thing. But that was really a good tool to be able to use across the board for everybody.
I think for me, Alan's comment about it taking 5 years to get something that to me seems so simple put into effect was convicting to me that it needs to be more than one conversation.
Mhm.
And I need to worry less about bugging people maybe and more about making the church inviting to everybody.
Yeah, that's good. Anyone else? All right, well, I want to thank Tori for her wisdom. I mean, really, like, she is in the middle of this. I don't know if conference is the right word, but you're in the middle of this thing where this is what you're discussing, and you took time out to share with us. So thank you, and thank you everybody for being part of this conversation. So we will continue. I mean, this is what we want to do, is we want to continue to provide these forums so that we can talk about these things and bring them to our churches. I'm going to read what Tori just shared in the chat. Action steps that people identified. We need to not keep this information to ourselves, but rather invite others to learn. Invitational stance is key to it. Visual schedule put up front is a mind-boggling difference maker for a variety of kids. Takes time, but we, the church, need to be more quick and intentional about doing things to proactively make church welcoming. Yes, amen to that. So just in case you're not familiar, we do a monthly idea share, which normally is on the first Monday of each month at noon Eastern. We're not going to do one in July because it's like 4th of July-ish, but we'll be back in August. So I invite you to join us for those conversations, because we can kind of continue this conversation and check in with each other and encourage each other and see how those, how it's going, taking this back to our church. So, so again, thank you. Check out keyministry.org/events to be in the know about other things we have going on. And I really appreciate you all. So thank you.
I also appreciate you putting these on and engaging everybody in these conversations.
All right. Have a good one, everybody.